What if everything you've heard about tariffs is only partially right and misses important nuance? For years, mainstream media and economists have called tariffs a bad idea, warning they kill jobs and raise prices. But today, we're flipping the script. We'll explore surprising ways President Trump's tariffs could benefit everyday Americans, from bringing back jobs in vital industries to even helping the environment. And stick around till the end, because we'll reveal an eye-opening fact about tariffs and the national debt that might shock you. Let's start with the most obvious promise of tariffs: jobs. Tariffs make imported goods more expensive, which can encourage companies to produce more in the US and hire American workers. Mainstream experts often insist that Trump's tariffs hurt manufacturing employment overall, and indeed, studies found mixed results. But there's evidence that tariffs shielded some industries and sparked a mini revival. For instance, in 2018, the Trump administration put a 25% tariff on imported steel under Section 232. According to the Economic Policy Institute, U.S. steel output, employment, capital investment, and financial performance all improved following those tariffs. American steelmakers announced $15.7 billion in new or upgraded facilities, creating over 3,200 new jobs before the 2020 downturn. This real-world case shows tariffs can jumpstart a struggling industry and put people back to work. Beyond individual industries, broader analyses suggest tariffs could boost overall domestic employment under the right conditions. The Coalition for a Prosperous America, a think tank focused on U.S. manufacturing, modeled a 10% across-the-board tariff on all imports. The results were striking. They projected 2.8 million additional American jobs and about $728 billion in extra economic growth as companies expanded domestic production. Why such big gains? Because when U.S. factories get a fair shot against cheap imports, they ramp up output, and this creates a multiplier effect. New factory jobs mean more spending at local shops, more demand for local services, and so on. It's also about the quality of jobs. Many of the manufacturing jobs lost to offshoring were well-paying, middle-class jobs. In fact, the average U.S. manufacturing worker earns about $34.42 an hour, far more than workers in retail or hospitality. So when tariffs help reopen a plant or save an industry, they aren't just creating any jobs. They're often creating good-paying jobs that can support families. Economists Otter, Dorn, and Hansen famously found that the surge of imports from China after 2001 cost the U.S. 2 to 2.4 million manufacturing jobs. By stemming the tide of import competition, communities that were hollowed out by factory closures might see new life. Machines restarting, paychecks flowing, and local economies revitalized. National security? What do tariffs have to do with that? In a word, independence. A country that can't produce its own essential goods, from food and electronics to steel and medicines, is vulnerable. Trump's tariffs were often justified on these grounds, to ensure America isn't at the mercy of foreign powers for critical materials. In early 2018, the U.S. invoked national security tariffs on steel and aluminum, arguing that a robust domestic steel industry is vital for defense equipment. Fast forward to today, and this idea has only gained traction. Policymakers across the spectrum worry about reliance on adversarial nations for strategic goods. Tariffs, coupled with other trade actions, can encourage companies to reshore production of crucial components for jets, satellites, medical equipment, you name it. Consider the case of pharmaceuticals, a truly essential supply. Did you know that as of 2024, the U.S. produced only 37% of the pharmaceuticals it consumes? Back in 2002, USA made 84% of their own medicine, but over the years, they outsourced the rest to foreign factories. This heavy import reliance has led to drug shortages and even safety concerns. One analyst put it bluntly, "We didn't just outsource manufacturing, we outsourced the sovereignty and safety of our healthcare system." Tariffs on imported drugs or medical ingredients, combined with incentives to make them here, could bring back domestic pharma production and ensure USA is not scrambling to import basic medicines in a crisis. The same logic applies to other sectors: semiconductors, rare earth minerals, defense electronics, food supply. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Americans saw how quickly international supply chains can break. Remember the scramble for masks and ventilators? By using tariffs and industrial policies to nurture local manufacturing, the U.S. can build a resilient supply chain that doesn't collapse under pressure. It's not just about war scenarios. It's about being prepared for pandemics, natural disasters, or foreign embargoes. In April 2025, the White House even launched an investigation into over-reliance on imported critical minerals, used in everything from missile guidance to smartphones, warning that dependence on adversarial nations for such materials exposes the economy and defense sector to supply chain disruptions and economic coercion. Tariffs are one tool to counter that risk by incentivizing companies to mine and manufacture key components at home. In short, bringing supply chains back within our borders means more control over our destiny. It's a 21st century twist on an old idea. Economic security is national security. Next, let's talk money, specifically government revenue. Tariffs are essentially taxes on imports. And who pays those tariffs? Importers initially, but often passed along to consumers or absorbed by foreign exporters. Regardless of who ultimately bears the cost, tariffs bring cash into the U.S. Treasury. This is one often overlooked benefit. At a time of trillion-dollar deficits, tariff revenue can help fill the coffers. In fact, tariff collections have surged. In the 2024 to 2025 period, the U.S. government collected about $81.4 billion in tariffs in a single fiscal year, 65% more than the previous year. Believe it or not, that was more revenue than all federal excise taxes combined. Excise taxes are those on specific goods like gasoline, alcohol, etc. Tariffs became a significant income stream, easing the tax burden that would otherwise fall on citizens or businesses. Now, critics say this is just a tax on consumers in disguise. But remember, targeted tariffs make importers choose, either pay the duty or shift sourcing to the U.S. If they shift, that means more production here, good for jobs. If they pay, that funds the government. It's a win-win from a revenue standpoint. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, recently crunched the numbers on an expanded tariff plan and delivered a stunning finding. Tariffs could reduce the U.S. budget deficit by $2.8 trillion over the next 10 years. Yes, you heard that right. Trillions in deficit reduction. By cutting the need for federal borrowing, tariffs would also save an estimated $500 billion in interest payments that taxpayers would otherwise foot. In plain English, tariffs can help pay down the debt. And we're talking about a national debt that's over $33 trillion and climbing, a figure that keeps many economists up at night. Every extra dollar the government brings in without raising income taxes or payroll taxes is helpful. Tariff revenue, in effect, asks foreign producers and importers to contribute to America's tax base, rather than placing the entire burden on American workers' wages. Plus, if tariffs succeed in growing domestic businesses, those businesses and their employees pay more income tax as they earn more. It's a virtuous cycle. More U.S. industry equal to more tax revenue, equal to less budget stress. Some analysts even argue tariffs are a more economically sound way to raise revenue, shifting the load off domestic labor and onto foreign entities. All this new revenue can fund infrastructure, education, or be returned to citizens in the form of better welfare programs and services. Things that improve everyday life. Here's a benefit few people think about. The environment. Wait, aren't tariffs supposed to be about economics and trade wars? True, but they can have a green side effect. Over the past few decades, the U.S. has outsourced a lot of dirty manufacturing to places like China, where environmental standards are often weaker. We proudly point to lower emissions at home, but a part of that is because many polluting factories moved overseas. Those emissions didn't disappear, they just shifted to a different sky. By bringing production back to America, where regulations are stricter and technology is cleaner, the global pollution from making those products can actually drop. Consider this eye-opening comparison. Making a standard desktop computer in China generates up to 3 times more carbon dioxide than making the same computer in the United States. Why? Because Chinese manufacturing relies heavily on coal-fired power and less efficient processes, whereas U.S. factories use cleaner energy and must follow tougher rules on emissions. In one analysis, researchers found that as U.S. imports rose, the outsourced carbon emissions overseas rose from 12% to 22% of total U.S.-linked emissions. In other words, we reduced our carbon footprint on paper by buying goods made in polluting factories abroad. That's like sweeping dirt under someone else's rug. Tariffs can counteract this by discouraging offshoring to high-pollution jurisdictions. When companies manufacture in the U.S., they have to meet U.S. environmental standards, which are among the strictest in the world. Even industry-specific examples show the impact. Take steel. Chinese steel plants often burn dirty coal and emit far more pollutants per ton of steel than American mills. Producing steel in the US emits significantly less CO2 and harmful particulate matter than producing that same steel in China. By keeping steel production here, a natural result of tariffs on imported steel, we're ensuring that if pollution is created, it's at least limited by modern scrubbers and regulations. As one commentator put it, a more local approach to manufacturing is less harmful for the environment overall. Instead of enabling pollution in countries with lax standards, we take responsibility to produce cleanly at home. Over time, this could contribute to lower global emissions, especially if other nations follow suit or if tariffs are paired with environmental policies like carbon tariffs. And here's the kicker. By insisting on cleaner production, we encourage innovation in green technology. Which brings us to our next point. They say necessity is the mother of invention. When companies face strict rules, whether it's tariffs or environmental standards, they adapt or die. In the United States, they don't let factories just dump waste into rivers or pump out toxic smog freely. They must innovate to reduce pollution. This pressure can be a good thing. Economists call it the Porter hypothesis. The idea that strict environmental regulations can spur companies to develop new, more efficient technologies. In other words, when you can't compete by simply polluting more cheaply, you find smarter ways to compete. By bringing manufacturing back under America's tougher environmental regulations, firms are pushed to invent cleaner processes and renewable energy solutions to remain profitable. For example, if a U.S. auto plant must meet emission standards that a foreign competitor might ignore, the U.S. plant has an incentive to come up with better filters, electric vehicle components, or energy-efficient production methods. Over time, these innovations can give U.S. industries a technological edge. History shows that past environmental rules led to breakthroughs, from catalytic converters on cars to cleaner power plant technologies. So, tariffs indirectly contribute here. By relocating production to the U.S., where the rules are tougher, companies will invest more in R&D for clean tech and pollution mitigation. That means more patents for green tech, more startups in renewable energy, and possibly faster progress toward things like affordable electric cars or better solar panels. And since the fight against climate change is global, any innovations we develop can be exported worldwide, multiplying the benefit. It's a fascinating twist. Tariffs, often criticized as old-fashioned economics, might accelerate cutting-edge innovation in sustainability. By refusing to allow the dirtiest production practices, which are often cheapest in the short run, we challenge the engineers and scientists to find cleaner, smarter ways, and they rise to that challenge. The result? American companies could become world leaders in green manufacturing tech, turning a policy seen as protectionist into a catalyst for progress. We've covered the big ones, but the list of potential benefits doesn't end there. Let's quickly touch on a few more often overlooked upsides of an America First tariff strategy. Reduced income inequality. Free trade critics point out that globalization's gains haven't been shared equally. The working class in industrial regions saw job losses and stagnant wages, while corporate profits and CEO pay soared. By contrast, tariffs that revive manufacturing can lift wages for blue-collar workers, narrowing the gap. Manufacturing jobs not only pay more, but also come with better benefits and more stability than many service jobs. A resurgence of middle-class jobs can start to rebalance the wealth distribution. In fact, one study found a tariff strategy could raise real household incomes by 5.7% on average, with the biggest boost for working-class families. That's money in the pocket of people who truly need it. Stronger communities. When a factory closes in a small town, the impact is devastating. Unemployment, young people moving away, local businesses shutting down. Bringing industries back has a powerful community effect. It means families can stay together because parents don't have to chase jobs across the country. It means the local Little League has a corporate sponsor again, the town budget has a tax base again, and pride returns to places that felt left behind. There's a social cohesion benefit that's hard to measure in dollars but is very real. Trade leverage. Tariffs are also a bargaining chip. We've already seen that once tariffs were imposed, dozens of countries came to the table to negotiate better trade deals. For example, tariffs on Chinese goods aim to pressure China to stop unfair practices, like forced technology transfer and intellectual property theft. Whether that succeeded is debatable, but the broader point stands. The threat of tariffs can push other nations to agree to more fair and reciprocal trade terms. That could mean better market access for U.S. exporters down the line or new trade deals that protect labor and environmental standards, national pride and self-reliance. Beyond the tangible metrics, there's a psychological benefit. Making things in America carries a sense of pride and confidence. It reinforces the idea that the US is not just a consumer society, but a producer society, capable of building, innovating, and leading. That national spirit can have knock-on effects, inspiring young people to go into engineering, trades, or manufacturing careers, knowing that those sectors have a future. It's easy to see why tariffs get a bad rap in the press. Prices on some goods did rise, trade partners got angry, and certain industries that rely on cheap imports felt pain. No policy is without downsides. But as we've explored, there is another side to the story, one where tariffs can help ordinary Americans in several ways. They can bring back good jobs, secure critical supply chains, boost government revenues for public good, reduce global pollution, and spur innovation in the technologies of the future. That's a pretty impressive list of potential benefits, and it hardly gets talked about in the nightly news. And remember that surprise we teased at the start? Here it is. According to the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the latest U.S. tariff policies are projected to slash the federal deficit by roughly $2.8 trillion over the next decade. Trillions. That's money that won't have to be borrowed from China or passed on to the next generation to pay. In Washington, you almost never hear tariffs and deficit reduction in the same sentence, but it's true, and it could be a game changer for the U.S. debt trajectory. In fact, tariff revenues this year outpaced all alcohol, tobacco, and gasoline taxes combined. It's a reminder that these trade policies, controversial as they are, have real fiscal bite. So the next time someone says tariffs are always bad, you'll know it's not so simple. There are hidden upsides that deserve attention alongside the downsides. What do you think? Could a tariff strategy, if done smartly, pave the way for a stronger, greener, more secure America? It's a question that challenges the conventional wisdom, and we hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. Thanks for watching and thinking critically. If you found this perspective interesting, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives. Remember, understanding the full picture helps us make better decisions as citizens. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.